Behind the polished aesthetic of Williams-Sonoma and Pottery Barn, a secret was hemorrhaging millions. This wasn't a cyber breach from a distant shadow actor. It was a masterclass in institutional seduction, executed from the very heart of the company's logistics network. For 6 years, a trusted general manager operated a clandestine ghost ledger, siphoning over $10.5 million through 335 undetectable transactions. He didn't need to bypass a firewall. He simply weaponized the company's own system of trust until the ledger became his personal ATM. Tonight, we perform the forensic autopsy on a heist involving shell companies, luxury yachts, and pet cloning. We trace the paper trail to show you how a $50,000 approval limit became a $10 million weapon. The evidence never lies. This is the Audit Files. Follow the money. Act 1. The Mechanism of Authority. The extraction of $10.5 million from a corporate giant like Williams-Sonoma does not happen overnight. It requires a specific kind of environment, a logistical nexus, where high-velocity operations meet a dangerous level of unchecked institutional trust. To understand how Ben Thomas III bypassed the safeguards of a multi-billion-dollar empire, we must first analyze the theater of operations, the Braselton, Georgia Distribution Center. In the global supply chain, a distribution center is more than a warehouse. It is a critical node where the company's physical inventory is converted into customer satisfaction. As the general manager, Thomas was the supreme architect of this facility. He wasn't just managing staff. He was the guardian of the company's regional assets. Williams-Sonoma empowered him with the authority to manage the facility's complex staffing needs, which included the hiring of temporary labor vendors. This is where the first institutional seduction occurred. In corporate governance, trust is often codified into approval thresholds, numerical limits designed to facilitate operational speed. For Ben Thomas, that magic number was $50,000. This was his executive approval threshold. It meant that for any invoice totaling $50,000 or less, Thomas was the beginning and the end of the audit trail. He possessed the power to create the need, select the vendor, and authorize the payment without ever needing a second signature or a higher level of forensic review. In the hands of a company man, this threshold is a tool for efficiency. In the hands of an internal threat, it is a weapon of systemic extraction. Thomas realized a fundamental truth about large-scale corporate ledgers. They are incredibly noisy. In a company that processes billions in transactions, a $45,000 payment to a staffing vendor is a drop in a vast ocean of data. It is a background signal that rarely triggers a manual audit. Thomas's strategy was built on what we call pulse layering, a method of siphoning capital through hundreds of smaller high-frequency transactions rather than one large detectable heist. He understood that the best way to hide a theft is to make it look exactly like business as usual. By keeping every fraudulent invoice meticulously under that $50,000 ceiling, he ensured that his ghost ledger remained invisible to the automated red flag systems at the San Francisco headquarters. He wasn't an outsider trying to hack his way in. He was an insider who recognized that the system's greatest strength, its reliance on managerial trust, was also its most exploitable vulnerability. Thomas didn't need to break down the door of the vault. Williams-Sonoma had already given him the keys, the security codes, and the authority to move the money himself. He just needed to create a destination for that money that no one else knew existed. Act 2. The birth of an empire. The transition from a trusted manager to an architect of systemic extraction began with a single calculated act of creation. In the forensic world, we look for the moment a shadow entity is birthed, a ghost vendor designed to look like a legitimate partner while serving as a direct conduit for stolen capital. Around 2017, that entity appeared on the paper trail, Empire Logistics Services. The naming of the company was a masterclass in psychological camouflage. Empire suggests a large-scale, established infrastructure. while logistics services is the exact vernacular of a distribution center's operational needs. To any casual observer in the accounts payable department, it looked like just another regional staffing firm providing the temporary labor necessary to meet peak seasonal demands. But under forensic scrutiny, the facade of Empire Logistics Services collapses. It had no fleet of trucks, no physical headquarters, and no payroll of its own. It was a shell, a digital ghost company registered and controlled exclusively by Ben Thomas III. Its only physical presence was a bank account, a destination for the institutional seduction Thomas was about to execute. The mechanism was deceptively simple. As the general manager, Thomas would generate a fraudulent invoice from Empire Logistics Services for temporary staffing services that were never provided. Because Thomas had the sole authority to approve payments under $50,000, he was effectively billing himself and authorizing the payment on behalf of Williams-Sonoma. This is what we call a closed-loop extraction. By keeping the loop entirely within his own sphere of influence, Thomas eliminated the risk of a third-party whistleblower or an external vendor catching the discrepancy. The first fake invoice was a forensic test, a pebble dropped into the vast corporate ocean to see if the internal audit systems would ripple. When the payment was processed, without a single inquiry from the San Francisco headquarters, the test was complete. The path was clear, and the extraction was no longer a theory. It was an active operation. Thomas understood that the secret to a long-term heist is not speed, but consistency. He didn't try to drain millions in the first year. Instead, he treated Williams-Sonoma like a private equity fund that only he could access. He began a methodical rhythm of billing and approval, ensuring that every pulse of capital remained under the $50,000 threshold. From the outside, the spreadsheets showed a healthy, busy distribution center managing its labor costs. In reality, the company was suffering from a slow internal bleed that would eventually total over $10.5 million. Act 3. The Deception Deepens. For 72 consecutive months, the extraction remained undetected. This was not a singular heist, but a methodical, 6-year erosion of corporate capital. The federal indictment reveals the staggering discipline required for this level of pulse layering. Ben Thomas III allegedly submitted and approved approximately 335 fraudulent invoices. The technical precision of the theft was its primary defense. By keeping every single invoice under the $50,000 executive approval threshold, Thomas ensured the transactions never reached the desk of a senior auditor. It was a calculated gamble on the noise floor of a multi-billion-dollar company. When you are moving billions in furniture and home goods, a $48,000 staffing bill is virtually invisible. It is just another data point in a sea of logistical overhead. But while the ledger remained quiet, Thomas's lifestyle became increasingly loud. The $10.5 million was not hidden in offshore accounts or encrypted wallets. It was converted into high-visibility assets. Prosecutors describe a transformation from a standard company man into a figure of extreme, unearned luxury. The paper trail leads to a sprawling 12,000-square-foot estate, a private yacht, a fleet of luxury vehicles, and premium tickets to professional sporting events. Perhaps the most surreal piece of evidence in this forensic autopsy is the allegation that Thomas used a portion of the stolen millions for pet cloning. This detail moves the case from simple white-collar theft into a realm of psychological excess. It suggests a level of perceived untouchability, that the money was so plentiful and the source so secure that he could spend it on the digital and biological resurrection of a domestic animal. However, the rot inside Williams-Sonoma was deeper than one rogue manager. During the same period, a secondary, entirely separate, systemic contagion was occurring. Between 2018 and 2022, a vice president named Eric Marsilia was allegedly running a complex kickback and rebate diversion scheme involving warehouse contracts, totaling nearly $20 million. This creates a chilling picture for any internal auditor. It suggests a corporate environment where the internal controls were so porous that multiple executives could operate independent, multi-million-dollar extraction schemes simultaneously without ever crossing paths. The institutional trust that Williams-Sonoma relied on to run its global empire had been weaponized by the very people sworn to protect it. As we prepare to reveal how this $10 million empire finally collapsed and the surprising external factors that led federal investigators to Ben Thomas III's door, we need your input in the command center. If you believe a $50,000 approval limit is a necessary tool for business or an open invitation for fraud, join the debate in the comments. Subscribe now to the Audit Files to receive your clearance for our weekly declassified dossiers. Follow the money. Act 4. The Discovery and the Fallout. All empires, whether real or constructed through pulse layering, eventually reach their forensic expiration. For Ben Thomas III, the end didn't come from a sophisticated internal algorithm or a whistleblower on the warehouse floor. It came from the methodical, cold-eyed reach of federal investigators. The investigation was spearheaded by the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit, whose special agents specialize in unraveling the exact kind of ghost ledger Thomas had maintained for 6 years. When huge sums of capital, totaling over $10.5 million, begin appearing in the personal bank accounts of a corporate manager with no legitimate business source, it creates a massive forensic red flag for money laundering. The web of 335 payments meticulously kept under the $50,000 threshold to evade internal eyes could not hide from the federal tracking of wire transfers and cash flows. On September 18, 2024, a federal grand jury in San Francisco unsealed the indictment. Ben Thomas III was charged with 8 counts of wire fraud and 4 counts of money laundering. The legal fallout is severe. Under federal law, each count of wire fraud carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, while each money laundering count adds another 10 years. Thomas had his first court appearance on October 1, 2024, marking the transition from architect of trust to a federal defendant facing decades of incarceration and millions in restitution. But the discovery of this $10 million internal bleed was only one part of Williams-Sonoma's systemic crisis. In April 2024, just months before the Thomas indictment, the company was hit with a record-breaking $3.17 million civil penalty by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. This was the largest penalty ever issued for Made in USA labeling violations. The FTC found that the company had repeatedly deceived customers by labeling products as American-made when they were actually manufactured in China. This creates a stunning picture of a corporate giant being attacked from 2 directions: externally, by its own deceptive marketing, and internally, by its own trusted executives. While Williams-Sonoma was paying millions in fines for lying to its customers, it was losing tens of millions to the systemic contagion of its own management. The trust was broken on every level of the ledger. A $3.17 million fine for marketing fraud and a $10 million theft from a single manager. The data shows that when internal trust collapses, external integrity follows. To help us map these corporate blind spots, we need your report. Have you ever noticed a Made in USA label that didn't feel authentic? Or a corporate policy that seemed like an open door for fraud? Share your observations in the comments. The evidence never lies. Act 5. The bigger picture. Systemic contagion. The heist at Williams-Sonoma was not an isolated failure of internal controls. It was a symptom of a much larger global, systemic contagion. As we move through early 2026, the data shows that the same institutional seduction used by Ben Thomas III is being mirrored and amplified by bad actors across the digital economy. To understand the future of financial crime, we must look at 2 other $10 million autopsies that hit the ledger at the same time: the OP4G survey fraud and the Michael Smith AI streaming heist. In April 2025, federal prosecutors unsealed an indictment against 8 executives from the market research firms OP4G and Slice MR. This was the Ants Conspiracy, a decade-long operation that poisoned the very data major brands use to make billion-dollar decisions. For 10 years, these insiders allegedly sold $10 million worth of fabricated survey data to their clients. They didn't just guess the results. They created an industrial bot army of low-paid fraudsters, nicknamed ants, who were trained to impersonate legitimate survey takers. Using VPNs and coaching scripts, these ants bypassed data quality checks to mimic real human behavior. Just like Ben Thomas III, these executives were insiders who knew exactly where the audit systems were blind. Simultaneously, the music industry faced its first major criminal case of AI-driven digital necromancy. In September 2024, Michael Smith was indicted for allegedly stealing over $10 million in royalties from platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. Smith didn't write a single lyric. He used AI to generate hundreds of thousands of songs with nonsensical titles and credited them to fake artists. He then deployed a network of up to 10,000 bot accounts to stream his instant music billions of times. By siphoning money from the collective royalty pool, he was effectively stealing from every legitimate musician on the planet. As we reach early 2026, these cases have converged into a new, industrialized fraud landscape. The all-green problem is now the greatest threat to corporate security. Every control shows a green light, yet the system is being drained from within. Fraudsters are no longer just stealing real identities. They are birthing synthetic identities, combining real breached data with AI-generated images and video to create invisible fraudsters that bypass traditional onboarding. The line between a human employee and a digital ghost has never been thinner. Act 6. The Autopsy Conclusion, Survival Protocol. The $10.5 million extraction from Williams-Sonoma and the $30 million in wider systemic fraud revealed tonight serve as a definitive autopsy of the modern era of trust. As we conclude this audit in early 2026, the evidence shows that institutional trust is no longer a sustainable business model. We have entered a zero-trust reality, where the person you empower with the keys to the vault might be the very one rewriting the ledger in the shadows. The path forward for 2026 requires a total dismantling of our traditional authentication mechanisms. Corporations are being forced to move toward multimodal defense, analyzing sub-audible voice frequencies and microbehavioral signals, like typing cadence and interaction speed, just to prove an employee is real. The days of a $50,000 threshold being safe because it's small are over. For you, the survival protocol is clear. Assume the medium is compromised, whether it's a Made in USA label, a corporate invoice, or a digital survey. The origin must be verified, out of band. The paper trail has gone digital, and the phantoms are learning to walk through walls. But as long as we keep following the money, we can still see the shadows they leave behind. This concludes this file. The dossiers on Ben Thomas III and the internal bleed are now part of our permanent forensic archive. If you value this level of deep dive financial autopsy, ensure your security clearance is active by tapping the notification bell. We are the auditors of the shadows. We are the Audit Files. Follow the money.